Hi, it's Frank. Once again, looking at melodies. Specifically, this time we're looking at a song called Morning is Broken, and we're looking at the way in which arpeggiated or broken triads are used to help craft the melody, the melodic material for the song. Melodic, again, just being this idea of one note to the next, as opposed to harmonic, which is a block chord, as pianists often call it, meaning when we strum a bunch of notes at the same time. So looking at the very first measure of the song, which as you probably already figured out is linked in the description to the video, we can see that we have the D as in dog, the tonic triad, played out from low to high, meaning all the way through the triad to the octave. And that happens to span, since we're in 3/4, the first two measures. The chords that accompany us are the tonic chord to begin with, and then the way this particular arrangement is set up, the submediate chord of B minor comes in next. That's measure 2. But of course the D note fits in both of those chords, and the main thing to notice is that that D triad, the tonic triad, is established right at the beginning in a nice smooth rising action, meaning D, F sharp, A, D. That's it. Moving from there into the last half of this line, the next three measures involve the chords E minor, A or A7, just as commonly played, and then the G. So breaking those down in terms of the progressions and how we look at those as far as other videos I've had with you, we know that E minor represents the supertonic, the second degree chord. A or A7 is 5 or 5/7 in this key. G is subdominant. So it's worth noting, if isolating what the progression is doing in those three measures, we've got a 2 chord moving to a 5 chord, then pulling back to a subdominant chord. Again, little subversion of expectation, wherein 5 did not go right to 1. As far as the melody is concerned, those three measures also contain primarily the dominant triad. In this key, as mentioned, that would be A, C sharp, and E. And if we look starting in measure 3, we have that triad in reverse. We have an E, C sharp, we pass through the note B, and then arrive at A. Now on the PDF, I highlighted in green the next note, which is once again a move to the B as in boy note. And that carries on into the next line in measure 6, where we once again arrive at A. So really what we're seeing between measures 3 and 6 is one long dominant triad consisting of the notes A, C sharp, and E. And we've got the note B as in boy inserted in 2 different places. First as we descend the triad, and then as we briefly move up to it and then back to the tonic of that triad A. And that would be in measure 6. But really, it's just another triad, the dominant triad. So in the first 6 measures of the piece, and I touched on this, I think, in the last video when we were dealing with the previous song, we've established the tonic and the dominant right off the bat in the melody. Even though, as mentioned, there are some other chords moving through this progression in those first 6 measures. Tonic chord, dominant chord, supertonic, submediate, there's even the subdominant chord. Bunch of different chords moving through here, but the melody itself is laying itself out pretty clearly. Main home chord of D as in dog, tonic, and then the 5 chord, A, C sharp, and E in this case. Passing tone B, which is used twice in those first 6 measures, is really just to provide a little bit of variation and to break up that dominant triad. So as we look over the rest of the piece, beginning in the second line, we can see that the tonic triad comes back once again, specifically in measures 7 and 8. Here there is an E inserted between the D and the F sharp. And then in the last measure of that line, measure 10, we see the actual tonic triad once again played in reverse, A, F sharp down to D, without any notes inserted. It's worth pointing out, just as a bit of symmetry, and again, we saw some of this if you followed my last video also, that the triad is broken up with a note, in the case of measures 7 and 8, that is between the first 2 notes of the actual triad. So really what we're talking about then is when we say that it's got D, E, F sharp going to A, and we expect the triad to be just D, F sharp, and A, we're just playing the first 3 notes of the major scale in the case of that D chord. In the case of the previous chord I mentioned at the end of line 1, the dominant chord, the B that's in there is once again between the A and the C sharp, the root and the third of that triad. And it's very similar in that we're playing the first 3 notes of what would be, in this case, a scale or a mode, known as mixolydian in this case, that still relates directly to the key of D major. So again, we're completely diatonic here, but the way the notes are being used to pass through, the notes that are chosen to pass through, is very specific. They are accentuating, or at least providing a little bit, I should say, of, I wouldn't exactly say dissonance, but in essence, that's what passing notes really serve us best as, is providing a momentary dissonance where it doesn't necessarily fit exactly within the notation of the chords. Notation in this case meaning the notes in the chords. So it is a form of dissonance, although to our 21st century ears, it's a fairly minor one. Moving on through the piece then, on the third line, beginning where measure 11 is, we see that for the fourth time, the tonic triad is used. This time it's actually broken up a little differently in the previous instances. It's from the fifth down to the third, back to the fifth, and then up to the tonic as the octave, meaning above the A note. So in this case, it's basically a tonic chord that's in first inversion. But the notes are all there, and they're one after the other. That is to say, between measures 13 and 14, it's just that triad with the octave, the higher octave of D played. And once again, we see the chords D as in dog and B minor here, the tonic as well as submedian. On the next line, measures 16, beginning there, we see that we have the tonic triad once again played in reverse, 5, 3, 1, and the 1 is repeated as we get to measure 17. Measure 17 also marks, technically, the beginning of the next use of that triad, extending all the way to the end of that line, meaning up through measure 20. At that point, what we see is we have a D, which is a dotted half note, an E, supertonic in this key, second degree, also a dotted half note, and then F sharp, E, F sharp, A. So in this instance, and I've circled this in the PDF if you're reviewing it, we see that the E is once again used twice between the tonic of this triad and the third, meaning the D and the F sharp. And it's used once again to add a little bit of passing dissonance, just to raise the interest level. But it's very similar to what we saw earlier, when the E was also used between D and F sharp. Finishing out this piece, we have the last four measures, which actually don't feature a complete triad. What we do see, though, in the chord progression, and it's noteworthy for that reason, are the chords subdominant G, dominant A, tonic D. So we did a 4-5-1 progression just to seal the deal and make it very clear that we're moving back to the end of this song with a very common and very strong sounding progression. That one, once again, being subdominant, dominant, tonic. So then when we step back and look at this piece in total, reviewing the melody and the triads that are within it, we see that we find the tonic triad used in 6 different places. In 4 of those places, we have it appearing just as the actual 3 notes of the triad. In the first instance, there is the use of the octave, but again, octave doesn't matter, it's the same note for our purposes. In 2 of those 6 instances, we do find a note inserted within the triad just to break it up, and that note happens to be the same in both instances, E. So again, outlining the first 3 notes of the major scale in this case, D as in dog being the major scale. The only other triad we see presented is the A, or dominant triad, and in this case it too is broken up using a note that is between the root and the third of that chord. That would be the B as in boy note between the A and the C sharp. So similar techniques going on, right? The idea here, though, is that we're still using very important triads, tonic and dominant in this case, to really outline these melodies. And although these songs, this one and the one from the previous video, are folk songs, this is a pretty common technique. And as we get into other songs, certainly more complicated ones, we'll see the same kinds of things happening. Because again, using triads in this way as broken chords really helps affirm what's going on in the overall harmony of a song. Okay? So that's it for this week, and once again, if you get a chance, download or at least look at that PDF. You can see all the things that I just talked about. I highlighted them on that particular PDF, so feel free to view that link. Take care.